Yay. Yay and repeat yay. We seem to have solved the problems that so dreadfully impacted on us last night. Who all is here? I can see, I knew something was wrong last night because there were no comments. And I know that all of you kind people tend to check in. So, hello, Jerry. Hello, Kelly. Hello, Len. Hello, Emily. Hello, Barb Ann. Hello, Timothy. Hello, Angie. Hello, Stuart. Hello, Jeremy. And hello, Kenneth. Kenneth Kelly and Kelly Kenrick. You two ought to meet each other. Anyway, then that way people with lots of K's meeting each other. And you got 4 K's though, which is much better than 3 K's. Much better, obviously. You don't want to be KKK, but KK, that's an organization that I can support. I don't know what it would be. The Kenneth and Kelly Cool Club, all with K's. Anyway, hello. Oh, my poor brain. Hello. Those of you who were here last night will know that we had a kind of a massive screw up of various. Hi, Nancy. Hi, Becca. We had a massive screw up, which actually today I thought I had it all solved. And then I found out that somehow Chrome has reset it back to private again. Hello, Rook. So as a result, this almost happened all over again. I don't know what's going on or why it keeps defaulting back to isn't Kelly says be a little weird if there was a marriage. Kelly. It wasn't Kelly. Wasn't that like a wrestling person? Wasn't she a wrestling person, or isn't she a wrestling person? I don't know about all these things. I'm kind of ignorant about wrestling. My knowledge of wrestling largely stopped back in the 1980s when I realized that a lot of people were taking it very seriously. Whatever, I don't care. If you love wrestling, you go. If you love sports, you go. If you love anything that is harmless to others, you go and you enjoy it. That's my philosophy of life. Matthew, hello, and CJ. Matthew, by the way, over here is our agent. He agents for both Deb and I, but he's also a dear, dear friend. So it's lovely to see Matt. Hi, Matt, and CJ's new. Hi, CJ. Welcome aboard. Anyway, so again, I won't spend a long time on it, but I was trying to read last night and couldn't do it because nobody could see what I was posting, and apparently I'm wondering if I got a new Chrome and it like updated it without telling me, and for some reason it had as its fallback all the privacy settings were set to only me, which, as I pointed out in a response later on, the whole idea of having a live broadcast that only you can see, even for somebody who is as full of himself as I am, that's a bit of a weird concept. I guess maybe people record them ahead of time and then post them, but then why would you do live video? That doesn't make sense. Anyway, I don't know. It's all beyond me. So we are here, however. We are here. Life is lifelike. Of course, life usually is exceedingly lifelike. Hello, Melissa. And we're going to be reading again tonight. So just to let you know on that, before I talk about anything else, I will be continuing with War of the Flowers. Now, you don't need to see the name. You know who it is. That's me, in case you weren't sure and you were just happening to be looking at my Facebook page without knowing whose Facebook page you were looking at. And then suddenly we're looking at a live broadcast. It's very weird. Tony, you can't see me? It seems like everybody else can, Tony, so that may be something that you have to deal with on your end. Anyway, we're reading more from War of the Flowers tonight. And it's also our daughter's birthday, so I'm in a lot of trouble for reading instead of not reading. But as I told them, I said I can't cancel because I already messed up last night, and if I cancel tonight at the last moment, it will be trouble because I hadn't realized that our daughter's birthday was arriving on a Sunday. It's her 21st birthday. She is one of the world's great human beings, and she's never on Facebook. She doesn't do Facebook. She's a Graham child. So hi, Connie. Hi, Sean. And so that she will never know any of this. So I could actually say anything I wanted to and describe her as worthless and destructive and anything I wanted. But it's not true. She's a great person, and I love her dearly. It's her 21st. She is a non-drinker. She will never, 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 never ever drink, I don't think, in her whole life. Deborah tried to get her to sip some champagne once about 10 years ago when she was a kid. And she still talks about it like Deborah had tried to pour molten lead down her throat. Mom, remember when you tried to kill me with champagne? So, hey, Jamie, how you doing? And Angela, hi. Yes, Angela. Yes, she is. Angela used to be, well, she wasn't ever Devon's, our daughter's nanny, but she was our son's nanny before Devon came along. So yes, Angela, she is 21. It's freaky, isn't it? Ruby, hi. Well, everybody's showing up tonight. And Tim from West Peoria. All right. And Renee. Look, all these lovely people. Anyway, so it is her birthday. She got a ton of art equipment. She has really, during the pandemic, she has gone big time into sewing and art projects because she's the one who's got compromised immune system for various reasons, although she's doing okay otherwise. And we have managed to keep her healthy, and she has managed to keep herself healthy during all of this. So, and hello, Penny. Thank you. I'll pass that along. So it is her birthday today, and we are celebrating. And we are probably all going to watch one of the Studio Ghibli movies. At least that's my vote. Hi, Katie. And hi, Tony. There, you got me. Okay, good, excellent. Devin is waffling between wanting to watch a Ghibli movie, although we've seen all of them like 11 times, or one of her childhood favorites like Aquamarine, which is, I think, a mermaid movie made for preteens. And so I am rooting really hard for, I said, I'll watch Ponyo or Spirited Away for like the 19th time. Please don't make me watch Aquamarine. I'm sure it's a fine movie. I'm not criticizing the movie. I've never seen it, but I'd rather watch a Ghibli movie again than watch a preteen mermaid movie. I'm sorry. I'm a very old dude now, and preteen mermaid movies are just problematic for any number of reasons. So yeah, and Nausicaa has been discussed too, Sean. Yes, that has also been. We have the whole collection. We have the whole Ghibli collection, of course, because that's the kind of family that we are, as I'm sure many of your families are too, in terms of what you like. By the way, interesting, very interesting. If you haven't seen it, very strange, bittersweet, sad, kind of mystical in some ways. The what is it called? Oh God, it's another anime film. It's not Miyazaki. It's the Night Train. Oh God, I'll think of it later on. But I just watched it the other night, and it's really quite interesting and surprising. It's based on a book written in like 1927, very famous in Japanese culture. And I've just, of course, gone totally blank on the name of it. It's Night Train to the Stars or something. Anyway, it's much less weird, or at least less science fictiony than that. It's very much in the same spirit of a kind of magic realism folk tale. Hello, Dawn. Yeah. Oh, I am old. I am older than procrastination. I am older than dirt. Hi, Brian. But that's okay. I don't mind. I have survived a lot of things to get to this point, and I'm not complaining. Anyway, the name of that movie will come to me, because those of you who are Studio Ghibli lovers might in fact really enjoy it. It's really a strange and wonderful film. Okay, so what else is going on? As I mentioned last night, when I did finally get back online, people I was talking there, the news on my dad has been good so far. He's getting to go home on Thursday, which is a week earlier than he had thought, and he's been kind of stuck. He's been stuck in the rehab place for a while, and it's been a bit of a downer for him, because unlike the hospital where my mom could go visit, you can only have one visitor because of COVID, and because my mom could go see him every day, whereas at the rehab place you have to call, you have to make an appointment, they have to have somebody available who can bring them outside, the patient outside to you, and etc. Thank you, Sean. Night on the Galactic Railroad. Night on the Galactic Railroad is the name of that movie. And as I said, it will surprise you in some ways. It seems slow in the sense that things don't happen sort of pell-mell, boom, 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 boom all the time. But it's really quite beautiful, and there's a lot going on in it. And it's also, I wouldn't say it's peculiarly Japanese, but it's very Japanese in terms of its sort of animistic response to the universe. But a really cool movie, Night on the Galactic Railroad. Thank you for supplying that, Sean. Anyway, Brian, yeah, hey, come on over and get the stepladder. Be my guest. Much as I love you, buddy, and much as I respect and honor you, I ain't carrying it to Utah for you. Anyway, so what else is going on? Anything of note? No, today's been birthday day and checking in with friends day and me getting some sleep to catch up for last night day and all that stuff. So that's basically what's going on this end. We're hunkered down. We're having a birthday party. I am cleverly disguised as a responsible adult. And there, now it's gone back into focus again. I'm going to have to figure out how to manually adjust focus on this webcam because it keeps going out of focus and into focus without me telling it to. And I already have that from the children and animals in my life. I don't need that from a camera as well, that is just going to decide to do what it wants. Anyway, so with no further ado, and especially since I missed reading time last night, I am going to start reading from The War of the Flowers. We're on chapter 4, a very brief précis to bring you back up to date for those of you who haven't been following. We had a prologue about a meeting between the remover of how does this phrased there? Inconvenient obstacles and somebody affiliated with Hellebore House. We have, after that, we met Theo. Theo was just on the verge of cascading down into a series of horrible events in his life. First, his live-in, or, they lived together. His girlfriend had a miscarriage, and in the wake of the miscarriage, basically said, I don't want to go forward with you, and sort of cast him out. And then he moved in with his mother, his widowed mother, and then his widowed mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she died, and that was a very depressing set of events. And that's where I left it. That was the end of chapter 3. So now, assuming we've got all the lights on, yes, now I am going to read, starting with chapter 4, The Hungry Thing. And as you may notice, we are going back and forth between the real world and something else, somewhere else. So if you haven't read the book before, that's why some of these places sound rather strange and mysterious. Chapter 4, The Hungry Thing. The warehouse district sweltered in heat unusual even for the season. A work gang of Nixies, lounging on a break in the shade of one of the tall old buildings, were reluctant to move back out of the black coach's path until one of them recognized the flower glyph on the license plate. A name passed between the lean, hard-muscled creatures, a murmur like the sea that was denied to them until their indenture had been paid, and they quickly flattened themselves against the wall to let the limousine pass. The Nixies talked of it that evening in the tavern called Tide's End, but not much, and only in nervous, rippling whispers. The coach pulled to a silent stop in front of the last building in the row, a large, windowless, ramshackle structure perched at the end of the wharf like an ancient animal sleeping in the sun. The coach shimmered in the heat haze. When the first two figures got out, the distortion made them seem even more monstrous than they were. Both wore long black overcoats, which did little to hide the immensity underneath. The pair stood for long moments, motionless except for eyes constantly moving in the shadows of their wide-brimmed hats. Then, at some unspoken signal, one of them leaned and opened the coach door. 3 more figures stepped out, all in fine suits of dark, understated weave. The tallest of these newcomers looked up and down the now abandoned wharfside road. The Nixies had ended their break early and made themselves extremely scarce. then turned and led the rest into the building, pausing only to allow one of the gigantic bodyguards to pass through the door first. The inside of the building was quite different than the rust-flecked, peeling exterior suggested. The 5 visitors made their way down a long hallway, through pools of light angling down from what seemed to be ragged holes in the high ceiling, but on closer inspection proved to be oddly shaped skylights, each one carefully fitted. The hall itself was featureless, the walls painted a uniform smooth black, the floor carpeted in some dark velvety material that suggested its owner had no need to be warned by the sound of approaching footsteps, no fear of anyone piercing his sanctuary without him knowing about it long before they reached the door at the end of the hall. The door had a brass plate, but the plate was blank. One of the bodyguards reached for the handle, but the tallest of the well-dressed figures shook his head. He pushed it open himself and led his 2 slightly smaller companions inside, leaving the bodyguards to shuffle their feet nervously, making sparks crackle in the velvety corridor. The huge room inside was lit by more of the high, strange sky windows, so that the distant ceiling seemed to be held up by columns of angled light. The air was hot and close, and the smells that mingled there would have been unpleasant to a mortal, perhaps even maddening. The newcomers, despite superior senses, did not seem taken aback by the odor of the place, but as their cat-like eyes became accustomed to the strange striping of light and dark, the tall man's 2 companions slowed and then stopped, seemingly astonished by the jumble that surrounded them. The vast space was a warehouse of sorts, but even in this most ancient and mysterious of cities, it was unlikely there were any other warehouses like this. Although the down-stabbing light from the ceiling picked out much, it illuminated little. But what could be seen was very strange. Man-like shapes, statues perhaps, frozen in 1,000 different attitudes, filled the room like a crowd of silent watchers, most standing, but many tumbled onto their sides, arms that once reached toward some heavenly object, now seeming to grapple at the legs of their upright fellows. The silent figures were only part of the room's catalogue, and many other objects were less immediately familiar. Fantastic animals stuffed or reduced to rolled skins and piled bones. Open crates overflowing with rusting weapons or lengths of fabric whose colors seemed inconstant. Urns, caskets, and overturned cases that had spilled a wild variety of trinkets, from silver and gold jewelry to things that looked like children's toys formed from purest black carbon. Raw gems were even scattered carelessly about the floor like wildflower seeds. Shelf after shelf along the walls held jars in which things floated that did not encourage close study, things with eyes and even facial expressions, although in no other way manlike. Other jars were opaque, many extensively and carefully sealed, but some with the lids propped against the containers as though whatever was inside had been sampled in haste, or had perhaps escaped on its own. None of these containers appeared to be labeled, and even the small traces of powder sprinkled on the shelving around them, in what were obviously careful patterns, gave no clue as to what the contents might be. Other mysterious objects hung from the ceiling on wires. Kites made of skin, lamps that seemed to burn but gave no light. There was even a cloud of feathers that swirled continuously in one high spot near the ceiling, as though caught in a whirlwind, gleaming white tufts, cycling in and out of one of the columns of light, but never scattering, no matter how violently they blew. The tallest of the 3 figures continued on until he had reached the far corner of the warehouse, a place where no direct light fell. His 2 companions, their first curiosity sated, or perhaps curdled into something else, moved forward with a speed that in less graceful creatures might have been mistaken for hurry, and when they stopped, they stood close to their leader. A seated shape stirred in the darkness of the corner. "Ah," it said. "Welcome, Lord Hellebore." The tall one nodded. "I received your message." The thing in the chair moved again, but did not rise, and, to the unspoken but obvious relief of Hellebor's companions, did not come out of the shadows. The remover of inconvenient obstacles was not pleasant to look upon at the best of times, and far less so at home. And you have come. That is very kind of you, very obliging. I do not believe either of your companions have previously visited me here. Hellebore nodded and gestured to his fair-haired companion, and to the stern-faced fellow whose hair was even darker than Hellebore's own, a black so pure it suggested artifice. These are the Lords Foxglove and Thornapple. Yes, I know them. There was a strange wheezing creak as the remover stirred again. You will pardon me, lords, if I do not offer you my hand in greeting. Think nothing of it, said bearded Foxglove, perhaps a little too quickly. So then, this was Thornapple, the first councillor of Parliament, after Hellebore, the second most powerful man in Fairy. His ancient chilly eyes were as black as his hair, but his shaggy eyebrows were snowy white, as if they were the only things on him that had aged past indeterminate middle years. Is it time? I believe so, said the remover. As you specified, Lord Hellebore, and as you paid for, I have kept careful watch. If we wait longer, we may miss our moment. Are you certain we have not missed it already? There was no trace of impatience on Hellebore's pale face or in his silky voice, although it would have been madness to suppose he was not impatient, even eager. I am certain of nothing, but I think it is very unlikely. Hellebore waved away the distinction. Then let us begin. Tell us how to reach him. It is not so simple. I found him for you. You will also need me to accomplish the rest of what you wish to do. Thornapple frowned. Then who will we send for him? One of us? You? Not who, said the remover, and laughed his papery laugh again. You and your companions have used up your exemptions from the Clover effect, and you must take my word that travel to that world is no longer possible for me either. In fact, I very much doubt you can find any willing tool on our side with both the power and self-reliance needed to make the crossing and find your quarry. Brute force without wit, or wit without sufficient strength, would both fail, and with things changing so quickly, you won't get a second chance, I think. So is there no one we can send? Foxglove seemed relieved. I did not say that. I simply said it was not a who. With a strange, wet sound, the remover settled farther back into the darkness. Bring me what I need, please. I will describe the objects to you. While Thornapple and Foxglove searched for the mirrors, Hellebore stood with his hands thrust casually into the pockets of his trousers. He did not look directly at the place where the remover sat, but that might have been courtesy, although Hellebore was not known for it. He had not seen this most honest of the remover's various appearances before, but he had seen many things that even his most venerable colleagues could not imagine, and was not in the least squeamish. You realize that we will be crossing a line, Hellebore said at last, watching the angular Thornapple picking fastidiously through a pile of dusty framed pictures. This will not be like what happened with the unborn child. If we fail, we may all be fed to forgetting, you included. That is not much of a threat to me, my lord, said the remover. For a moment, Hellebore looked troubled, but was distracted when the invisible figure stirred and even seemed for a moment about to rise and step out into the light. Don't touch that, the remover shouted, voice ragged but startlingly loud. Put it down! Across the large room, Lord Foxglove, startled and a bit afraid, hastily put down the carved box he had been handling. The mirror is not there, the remover said, more quietly now. The next pile over. Do not touch that box again. Hellebore had noticed something like pain in the remover's words. He cocked a thin black eyebrow, but said nothing. At last, the two powerful fairy lords came back, staggering like overloaded servants, each carrying a large mirror framed in ugly, coarse black wood. At the remover's instruction, they propped them facing each other on the floor, with perhaps an arm's span between them. Here, the remover said, and for a moment his hand appeared from the shadow, holding a black candle in a dish. The two other lords quickly looked away, but Hellebore stepped forward and took the candle. Put it down on the floor midway between the mirrors, the remover said. Then light it and step back. Hellebore touched index finger to thumb and made a flame. At the moment it ignited, the apertures in the ceiling above narrowed, or something else happened to block their light. Within a few seconds, the warehouse was dark except for the candle's flame. Silence now, said the remover of inconvenient obstacles. And I'm sure it does not need saying, but I will say it anyway. Do not reach between the mirrors or in any way interfere with the light passing back and forth between them until I have finished. He began to chant quietly, a sound only barely distinguishable from raspy breath. It seemed to take a long time. The flame above the candle shrank until it was scarcely larger or brighter than a firefly's lamp, a tiny point that nevertheless became the focus of all the darkness around it. Something began to form in the space between the mirrors, a faintly glowing cloud, as though the original light of the candle had spread into something watery and diffuse. The cloud grew more distinct without becoming more solid, flowing from one side to the other of the light that bounced between the mirrors. It seemed constantly about to take shape, but although it never quite did so, there were shifting suggestions of a face, a dark hole of a mouth, and pitted, empty eyes. It was hard to look at it for more than a few moments, even for the three gathered lords of Faerie. As the remover's tuneless singing grew louder, the thing began to move more violently, writhing and snapping within the empty space between the mirrors, like something trying to find its way out of a cage. The room grew piercingly cold. The thing's mouth opened wide, then even wider, as though it could swallow even itself if it wished. What is it? Hellebore's voice was perfectly modulated, not too fearfully loud, not too overawed and quiet. The remover fell silent. When he spoke at last, his weary voice seemed to come from far away. It is an era, a ghost from one of the older darknesses, a spirit of pestilence, unknown in the mortal world since the stones of Babylon were leveled. And it will do what we need. You said that force without wit would be useless. Are you telling me that this thing has wit? Hellebore looked to his companions, perhaps for support, but they were staring at the shape between the mirrors with sickened fascination. It does not need wit. What one of you would have to do by craft, it will do by instinct, for lack of a better word. It is terrible in its implacability. It will follow its quarry wherever he goes, in whatever world, without pausing to rest and without a single qualm or hesitation. It does not think, not as you and I do, but it does not need to. It will take new bodies as it needs them to pursue its quarry, so it will never grow weary. Eventually, inevitably, it will find him and cleave to him, and then it will bring him to us. Clutched in its grip, the one you want will tell you anything. Do anything. Give up Anything he has, just to be free of this hungry, gnawing thing. Ah, I see. Hellebore nodded. It is very good. It is horrible, said Lord Foxglove. It is both, said the remover. In all the spheres there are only a few perfect things. This is one of them. When the three lords left the warehouse room, they found the two ogre bodyguards halfway down the corridor, staring up at the ceiling with mouths slack and arms dangling uselessly. Their legs worked just well enough for them to plod after their masters, but it was only when the black coach's doors had thumped shut and the horse-faced chauffeur had laboriously turned it around and driven it back out of the narrow street toward the freeway that the bodyguards began to blink their eyes and mumble. By the time the long black limousine passed out of the waterfront district, they could talk again. But the huge gray creatures still could not remember anything that had happened to them while they waited in the hall. Chapter 5. Book. But, hey, you'll be getting some money from the house, right? You could buy your own PA system. I don't know. I don't think so. Not right now. I'm serious, man. What they did sucked. I'd quit tomorrow if you wanted me to. We could find some other musicians, no problem. Guitar players, man, they grow on trees. The world is full of skinny guys who sat in their rooms all through high school learning to play every Van Halen solo. Theo couldn't help smiling, even though Johnny couldn't see him. Yeah, just what I need. Hook up with another worshiper of the extended guitar break. Whatever, man. Hell, we could get a keyboard guy. Instead, we could play anything. You used to write some cool tunes, Theo. And lyrics, too. Remember that thing you wrote about your father was a storm or lightning, something like that? You should start writing again. You were wasted with the clouds anyway. You need to get back to your roots, dude. When I first met you, I used to think, man, this guy's definitely going somewhere, and I just wanted to hang on to you till you got there. You could be that guy again. What is this, National Theo's Over the Hill Month or something? Kat had said something like that, too. Potential. A great word for people to use about you when you were 20. An embarrassment when you hit 30. Well, what are you talking about, man? I'm just saying that you got tons of talent, Thee. You need to use it. It was hard to talk. It had been good to hear Johnny's voice, to get past the stumbling apologies and into areas in which they were both comfortable, like what an asshole Chris Roll was. But now he was tired. He hadn't been talking much lately, and he was out of practice. I don't know, Jono. Maybe later on. Right now, I don't feel much like playing music, anything like that. You keep playing with the Clouds, boys. Chris is pretty talented, really, even though I can't stand the skinny little bastard. Maybe you really will get a record deal. Don't give that up for me. But you're my friend, man. That caught him short. It took a moment to move forward, to continue letting go. Thanks. Really. You're my friend too, John. Don't ever doubt it. I'm just not going to be very good at that, at the friendship stuff for a little while. I don't know. I'm just out of juice. My batteries are empty. So what are you going to do now that, you going to go back to Kasigian's? Not right now. I'm going to sell the house, take a little time. You know that old joke, death is life's way of telling you to slow down? Well, it works best when you're the one that dies, but I found out it pretty much works no matter what. He hesitated, unwilling to wander too far out into the things he had been thinking about. It wasn't really the kind of shit his friend wanted to hear, or would even understand. I'm just not ready to be in the world right now, Johnny. Give me some time. I'll be back. You better, or I'll come over and kick your ass. When he was off the phone, he took a deep breath, stared hard at the pile of real estate forms on the dining room table, and decided that it really wasn't too early for a second beer after all. You could pour things into an emptiness like this all day, but It would never fill up. Hey, I'm doing paperwork, selling property, right? That means I'm employed. I'm just lucky enough to have a boss who allows me to drink in the afternoon. He emptied half the beer in the first few swallows, then rubbed the cool bottle against his forehead, wanting everything to soften up, to get smooth and simple. Sure, he was drinking too much, but give a guy a break. He'd lost his girlfriend, their baby, and now his mother, all in a few months. Not a therapist in the world would fault him. And if he bumped into one who would, well, he'd smack him in the mouth. Shit. He stared bleakly at the forms, at the boxes of his mother's carefully ordered papers. The house was oppressing him, everything staying just where he left it each day because no one else lived there. All the clean, desolate surfaces, the empty rooms, his mother's things already stuffed into boxes and moved out to the garage because it was just too damn depressing to look at them anymore. But yesterday, the real estate lady had been in 2 or 3 times with clients and seemed, in her horrifyingly chipper way, to think that she had a few serious buyers already. Thank God for a strong housing market. The faster it sold, the less time he'd have to live there. He finished off the beer, contemplated briefly getting 2 or 3 more out of the fridge and just cashing in the afternoon in front of some stupid television movie. Not that he'd find anything decent, because his mom had never bothered to get cable, but that wasn't the point, was it? The point was to blot out the long hours, to smear the transition into evening when he would have the excuse of going out to get dinner somewhere. Then he could come back and safely, responsibly drink a few more beers like any normal householder, fall asleep watching the late news, and not have to think until the morning sun was blazing through the windows again. Something gurgled in his throat. It took a moment before he realized it was a scream bottled in his innards, a blast of misery trying to force its way out. He felt a chill across his hot skin, like the first signs of a bad flu. What am I doing? I don't belong here. He forced himself to get up and go to the table, staggering a little as he went. Had it been 4 beers already, or just 3? He sat in front of the boxes and spread papers, the tidy big blue envelopes from the realtor, his mother's address book, and card files, but he found he couldn't move. The light suddenly seemed wrong, even with all the drapes pulled, as though the entire house had been lifted out of the warm but unexceptional Northern California sunshine and dropped down onto the boiling surface of the planet Mercury. Worst of all, he felt something else staring out through his eyes, as though like a television image gone out of sync, there was suddenly more than one Theo. It was the dream, the terrible dream that came to him so often, but he was awake. The alien presence was just there. No thoughts he could share, nothing but a vague, oppressive sense of connection. Whatever the other Theo was, though, he didn't like it at all. It felt horribly cold, this phantom self, even in the midst of the heat that scorched his brain. Cold as a nugget of ice dancing in the tail of a comet. What, am I having a stroke or something? Oh God, please no. His thoughts fizzed for a moment like a string of dud firecrackers. Then the twist of strangeness suddenly loosened, leaving only the normal bleak light of a warm, shuttered living room, and a single thought that remained echoing in his brain. Dead. They're all dead. He put his head down and waited until he felt like himself again. One single self. They weren't all dead, of course. Catherine was still very much alive and dating someone else. And Johnny, shit, Johnny was immortal. No, don't even think that. Don't jinx him like you jinxed the baby. Theo pushed the beer and also that terrible thought away. But when he tried to concentrate on the real estate papers, again, it was hopeless, like trying to read the grain of a piece of wood. Lender's details, fire insurance, contents insurance, title insurance. Hours of research. No way he was going to manage it with his head in this kind of shape. He looked at his mother's box of personal papers. saw the edge of an envelope with blue and yellow flowers stenciled on it, and pulled it out. It was a card, a kitschy illustration of a kitten playing with a ball of string while the mother cat watched contentedly. The printed verse inside read, "Someone who helps me, someone who keeps me safe and happy too, someone who'll guide me my whole life through, and that someone, dearest Mom, is you." Scrawled under it, ragged as a killer's confession, "Happy birthday, love, from Theo." And here came the damn tears again. He couldn't even remember giving it to her. From the writing, he must have been about 6 or 7. What was surprising was that she had saved it. His mother, the queen of unsentimental pragmatism. What else was in there? He took the box back to the couch and tipped it over. Most of what fell out were the kind of things he had expected to find in the carton. Insurance policies, old bank books for saving accounts long closed. So why the hell was she hanging on to them then? And a few marginally weird things, like a handbook for breast self-examination hidden in its own little manila envelope as though it were pornography. But there were also a few letters to her from his father, one of which seemed to have been written in the 50s before they were married, while Peter Vilmos was still stationed in the Philippines and she was still in Chicago. Any hope that it might reveal his father's lusty, romantic younger self, the self a younger Theo had wanted to believe had been there before normal life had crushed it, but had never quite been able to believe in, disappeared quickly as he read it. Dear Anna, well, it's been a few weeks, so I thought I should write you again, since you said you wanted me to write. Life is pretty much the same. Jen Rhett, the guy in the next bunk, still snores like crazy. The food is pretty bad, but at least there's not much of it. Joke. I hope you and your mom and dad are good, and that your dad isn't still having so much trouble with being sick and missing work like you wrote. We had to put together a supply hut the other day, and I was in charge, which was harder than it sounds because it is really windy here, blowing up a gale, quote unquote, most of the time, and the sheet metal wants to blow away, and it is really heavy. But we got the hut built okay. There was another page, just as inconsequential, and it was signed, not love, not passionately yours, but sincerely. Had they slept together yet? Theo wondered. A stolen night or two at a motel or in a school friend's room before he shipped out? It was frighteningly close to what he believed of his father at the worst moments, that he really was the kind of man who would send a letter signed, "Sincerely, Corporal Peter Vilmos," to someone he'd seen naked. His mother had kept a few other letters from his father and some anniversary and birthday cards, but the old man hadn't gotten any more Casanova-ish as the years went by, although he did at least abandon sincerely as the years went on, and even signed some of the later ones, "Love, Pete." Other than that, there was very little to show for a lifetime. More birthday cards from Theo, but notably absent once he had turned 12 or so, some letters from relatives, and, to his own surprise, more than a few clippings from local papers about his own youthful career. Here was one from the Peninsula Times-Tribune about his high school production of Guys and Dolls, one paragraph marked with a highlighting pen. If some of the other leads were a little shaky in both vocal range and Runyon-esque accents, the same cannot be said of Theodore Vilmos, who brought verve and energy and an astonishing strength of voice to the role of Sky Masterson, the big-time gambler with a heart of gold. Young Vilmos commanded the stage, and this reviewer would not be surprised some years up the road to hear that he is playing this role and others on Broadway. End quote. She had saved other things too, more local write-ups about other plays and choral concerts where he had soloed, and even a review of a performance by his first band from Shredder, a semi-punky 80s fanzine. He had wondered once or twice where that review had got to, and here it was. Quote, "The lead singer is fucking hot, man, and I don't usually say that about boys, if you know what I mean. I haven't heard anyone sing like that since Bono and U2 broke. Pretty angry and angry pretty. I mean, if Eaton Young hangs on to their singer, these guys are seriously commercial. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's the truth." The fact that his mother had carefully censored the F word with a black felt tip. The fact that she would even have a magazine called Shredder hidden away in her drawer just because it mentioned his singing almost made him start crying all over again. Who knew? But the story's clear, isn't it? Johnny, Cat, even these reviews. I didn't take it where I should have. When did it all go sideways? He was depressed now in a way he hadn't expected to be, not just about his mother's insignificant life, but his own. He put the reviews aside and riffled through the rest of the papers. His mother had saved a few random recipes, a couple of notes from Grandma Dowd. No letters, but then she had lived with Mom and Dad in the last 15 years of her life, so why would she send her daughter letters? The notes from his grandmother were so uninteresting on the surface. One seemed to be a request for Anna to pick up a prescription, the other a page torn off an insurance company letterhead notepad that said only, "I'm sorry I forgot. Please remind me to look for it tomorrow, Mama." But for a little while, Theo wondered if they might, given some momentarily absent context, actually be important, might be revealed as clues to some larger family story. It was only as he leafed through the rest of the unedifying pile of paid bills and statements that he realized the reason Anna Dowd Vilmos had hung on to these meaningless notes was because she had nothing else of her own mother's to keep. Good night, nobody. For a moment, the chill seemed about to return, but it was only a shiver of despair at the thought of two people, both dead now. Three people, counting his father with his Quonset hut news bulletin, who had left so little behind to mark their existence, who had disappeared into death like stones thrown into a river, the ripples gone within moments. Everybody starts out as somebody, then it slips away. He wanted another beer now. He really wanted another beer. As he piled the papers back into the box, something he had missed the first time tumbled out of the large brown envelope of holiday recipes into which it had fallen. It was another small greeting card envelope, but strangely heavy. His mother's name and address were written on it in old-fashioned, somewhat cramped handwriting. What slid out of the envelope was not a card, but a folded letter. The surprising weight came from a bank book and a small key taped to the bottom of the last page of the letter with yellowed cellophane tape. Theo's eyes flicked to the ornate signature, which took him a moment to puzzle out. Your obedient servant, Amon Dowd. He was pretty certain that Amon Dowd was one of Grandma Dowd's brothers, although he couldn't remember much of what she'd said about any of them, since she'd left them all behind when she'd moved out to California. It was a longish letter, at least by comparison to the others his mother had saved. The postmark gave its date as January of 1971, only a couple of years after Theo's own birth. He considered another beer, then changed his mind and made himself a cup of instant coffee as he worked his way through the somewhat spiky handwriting. My dear niece, you will doubtless have trouble remembering me, since we have not met since you were a very young girl. But now that your mother is gone, you are the only family that I have left. The only true family, that is. Your mother, my sister Margaret, was the only one of that quarrelsome, blighted brood into which I was born, for whom I felt fondness. If I saw little of her over the years, and even less of you, it is because my travels did not permit it, rather than any lack of good feeling. Having known so little of me, you will doubtless find it strange when I say I owe you and the rest of your family a debt of shame that cannot be reduced or put right. I will not explain it. I could not do so in a letter in any case, but I will say that it weighs heavily on me now when I am about to set out on a journey from which there will be no returning. As a small gesture of goodwill and regret at having been such a poor uncle, I give it to you and your husband an infant son. I give to you and your husband an infant son what little I have left in the way of worldly property. Sadly, there is no family manor or chest of jeweled heirlooms. There is, instead, a small bank account and a few personal papers and other odds and ends. The money is yours, It is not much, but it will perhaps one day help pay for an education for your son or tide you over some of the lean times through which most lives pass. Again, I am sorry, even though it means nothing to you now and most likely never will. Among my effects you will find a book. Should you be so surfeited with leisure time that you decide to read it, please do not take it as the ravings of a disordered mind. It was an attempt at fiction of sorts, although not a successful one, I fear. A type of modern fairy tale that I hoped might find some small readership. But I could think of no effective ending. Now all endings seem one to me. I wish you and your young family healthy and happy lives. Theo narrowed his eyes, shook his head, then read the letter again. It didn't seem to fit into the rest of his mother's keepsakes any better than it had the first time. In the midst of stultifying normality, it made an odd little space for itself, like something out of an O. Henry story. The small key had to be for a safe deposit box. That much seemed clear. The bank book, its ruled lines full of careful little handwritten notations, was from something called Travelers Bank, with an address on Duende Street here in San Francisco. He'd never heard of the street, but the smudgy carbon paper directions to the place suggested it must be somewhere in the area of Russian Hill. The account had totaled something near $5,000. Not a small amount, 30 years ago, but not quite the life-changing bequest from a rich uncle that people dreamed about. It had all been withdrawn a week or so after the date on the letter, and the emptied account seemed not to have been touched since. It was funny that his mother had never mentioned it, but not really out of character. Theo now remembered that he had heard his grandmother talk about her brother Eamon at least once or twice. She had described him as the handsome one in the family, but also said that, quote, he never did put down roots, or words to that effect. But she had seemed fond of him, as his letter suggested. He also recalled her saying something like, if only he'd put all that cleverness to work about some close relative of hers, which he guessed now might be this Eamon, he'd have been a millionaire. But all that reading and such is no substitute for a bit of elbow grease. Theo stared at the bank book. What had happened to the man? Had he been sick when he wrote this? That a journey from which there will be no returning didn't sound very good. And what had he done to the family that he felt he had to apologize to Theo's mother, someone he scarcely seemed to have known? The bank account was long empty, but where were the other papers the letter had mentioned? Theo knew he had more pertinent matters waiting for him, but this letter from his great-uncle was the first thing he had come across in ordering his mother's estate that wasn't simply depressing. After that weird turn he'd just taken, he very much wanted to be doing something, anything, that might take him outside into the fresh air. And why is this key still here, anyway? There has to be a safe deposit box, but even if it's at this whatever it is bank, this traveler's place, it won't do me any good unless I know the box number. Well, I suppose I could do it the legal way. Show them it's part of my mom's estate and ask them to tell me the number. But that means I have to wait until it all goes through probate or some damn thing, doesn't it? Irritated and weary at the thought, he picked at the edge of the stiff, ochre-tinted strip of tape that secured the key to the letter. The ancient cellophane parted from the paper on one side, and the key swung out like a hinge, giving him a glimpse of ink. Behind it, so small that it had been hidden by the key itself, was the number 612, written in his great-uncle Eamon's cramped, careful hand. He found the place on a strange little cross street, halfway up a steep hill. It was one of those San Francisco Victorian houses so narrow that it was easy to walk past it without noticing the Travelers Bank sign beside the doorbell. His first thought was that it was pretty strange to have a bank in a house. His second, that someone must have kept the name but turned it into something else, one of those bijou restaurants people don't find unless a friend tells them about it, or a graphic art studio. It was too small to be a modern bank, and on a street like this, the walk-in business must be non-existent. There was a glass panel in the front door, but the lights seemed to be out inside, and he could see nothing of what lay beyond. There was a speaker grill with a small button next to the bank's name, so he pushed it. There's never more? The small, nervous voice that gurgled back out of the grill might possibly have been human. Hello? I have a safe deposit box here, I think. After a few moments, the door buzzed. He popped it open, found himself in a dark stair lobby, and walked up the steps. The door on the first floor landing was open. A plump young woman with pale, straight hair stood there, waiting nervously. Did you say you have safe deposit? She had a bit of an accent, perhaps Eastern European. Yes, it was part of my mother's estate, given to her by her uncle, a man named Dowd. He handed her the letter and the passbook. You can see for yourself, he had a regular savings account here, too. He held up the key. The box number is 612. Oh, she said it as though he had just informed her nuclear war would begin at any moment. Oh, no. What? She shook her head. Mr. Root, he is not here. But she turned and led him through the door. If it was a bank lobby, it was the strangest, smallest one he'd ever seen. The whole room was about the size of a Victorian parlor and similarly decorated. Pictures of stern-looking men in antique black suits hung on the wall, surrounded by dusty Baroque frames. In such a cramped room, they seemed almost to be leaning in on top of visitors. 4 clocks showing different times were displayed in a row on the wall. But instead of the usual London, Tokyo, and other financial centers, the plaques beneath the old-fashioned faces read Glastonbury, Carcassonne, Alexandria, and Persepolis. Was it a musty old joke of some kind? He'd heard of most of them, but he wasn't sure why anyone would care what time it was in any of those places. There were a few other pieces of office equipment, but none of them appeared to be a great deal more recent than the age of steam, except for some kind of huge teletype machine with a table all to itself near the back of the room, which looked like it might have been state-of-the-art during the Second World War. Do you still have the safe deposit boxes? She nodded eagerly. Oh, yes, in back rooms. She gestured at the rear wall and the door there, flanked by portraits of 2 frowning patriarchs. And when will this Mr. Rood be back? No, Rood, like 3, yes? But I don't know. Her pleasure at being able to confirm the existence of the boxes had dissolved, plunging her into anxiety once more. He comes in not very much. Maybe Friday? Maybe Monday? Theo looked around again. A stuffed crow stood in a glass case just behind the room's front door. And you're just here by yourself the rest of the time? Now her features took on a look of alarm. Not alone. There are other people in other offices. Next door, there's Pan Pacific Novelties. I don't mean any harm. I just, it seems weird. I mean, this is a bank, right? I've never seen a bank that looked like this. She shrugged. Most of customers very old, I think. They don't come here. Used to be very busy, this place, but years are gone. Now most of banking done by telephone, by fax. She pointed first at the rotary dial phone, then at the massive piece of machinery Theo had noticed earlier. Mostly I just answer questions. Questions? Like? She flushed and was suddenly a much prettier girl. Like, is fax machine on? He felt guilty for giving her the 3rd degree. It wasn't her fault. She was working for a company that was probably a front for some bizarre offshore money laundering schemes. Sorry, let me just get into the box and I'll let you get back to your work. Get into box? Yes, you said they're in the back, right? The safety deposit boxes? But Mr. Root not here. I don't need a loan or anything. There's a box in there that originally belonged to my mother's uncle. It's mine now. I've got the letter where he gave it to her, and I've got a photocopy of her letter making me executor of her estate, and I've got the key to the box. That's how these things work. He started toward the door at the back of the cramped room. Back here, right? She flapped her hands a little and looked at the heavy old dial phone, as if considering calling her absent boss to come save her from this madman who actually wanted to use the Travelers Bank as a bank. Or maybe she's thinking about stunning me with that 10-pound Bakelite receiver if I get any farther out of line. If the front room was dark and old-fashioned, Theo thought the back room made it look like a pop art painting by comparison. The only light came from a nest of wires which had once underpinned a spherical paper shade, the naked bulb now exposed in their midst like a glowing sun at the center of a medieval orrery. There were shelves and shelves of long, narrow boxes, but most of them seemed to be the bank's records, cartons stuffed with 3x5 cards lettered by hand. Mr. Root, he wants to get someone to put all this in computer, the girl said apologetically. Theo tried hard not to laugh at the thought of some poor bastard having to do the data entry for what looked like a perfectly preserved 19th century fiscal institution. If this was not the back room for Scrooge and Marley, it was a damn good imitation. Just show me the safe deposit boxes, please. The metal boxes had several shelves of their own near the back, with a strip of carpet and a very old swivel chair set up for the convenience of whatever Bob Cratchit had to work with them. Theo found 612, sat down with it in his lap, and wiggled the key back and forth several times without success. The problem was an old lock, not the wrong key. After a few more times, the key scraped past whatever grit had impeded it, and the lock opened. Theo would not have been surprised to see a cloud of dust billow up out of the box, as though he had unsealed Tutankhamun's tomb. Instead of gold or jewels, not that he'd been counting on either, he found only a leather-bound notebook. He said goodbye to the flustered young woman and walked down the stairs, the fairy tale reader in him half expecting to discover that his dozen minutes inside had really been a dozen hours, that he would find the moon high in the sky and the nighttime neighborhood deserted. But outside the front door, it was still prosaic afternoon. He stepped out of tiny Duende Street and headed back toward his motorcycle, the sun glaring flatly and the wind curling up the steep road, carrying the scent of the bay to him as it tugged at his hair and his clothes. And yeah, there's still a good 10 pages worth left in that chapter, so I think we'll stop there tonight before Theo starts reading his great uncle's book, which he found in the Traveler's Bank. So, that's it. Yeah, okay, good. The time is probably about right anyway. That's good. And I can be nicely. Oh, thank you, Tony. Tony is mentioning here that he's played the roles of Sky and Nathan Detroit, and someday he'll direct it, and I can be nicely, which means I suppose that I get to sing "Sit Down, You're Rockin' the Boat," which is, of course, one of my favorites. People all said, sit down, you're rocking the boat. And the devil will drag you under by the sharp lapels on your something coat. Sit down. Anyway, one of my favorite musicals, obviously. So I think that's basically where we're going to stop for tonight. I'm sorry, it's very tad. It takes a while to get to the part where the weird stuff starts happening, but we're just about there now. So, and at least tonight wasn't about people dying. It was about people who are already dead. So that's much nicer, I'm sure. Anyway, with that, I want to say again, thank you for joining me. It's always a huge pleasure. And I will pass all of your very, very kind wishes on to our daughter, who is upstairs celebrating, waiting to eat cake, and waiting for me to come join them to watch either some lovely Ghibli movie or some dreadful, stultifying mermaid movie, depending on where she's decided. And me, I'm going to bravely and honorably not try to change her mind, whatever it is that she's decided on, since it's her birthday. But I really don't want to watch Aquamarine. Anyway, but I do want to thank all of you, and I want to say that we will see you very soon. Next Sunday, and we'll have a proper 2 a.m. reading for those who are better suited for that time, and then I'll be reading again on Sunday at 7 p.m. this time slot for the rest of you the next day. And until then, please continue to be good to yourselves and your loved ones and family and neighbors and the people around you. That's what we really need right now, and we also need people to pay attention and take care. And for God's sakes, remember we're in the middle of a horrible pandemic, and I know the kind of people that I talk to online, who are friends of mine online and who are readers of mine, are generally all really kind, sensible people, and smart people, so that they know that it's not yourself you're protecting when you're wearing a mask. You are protecting other people, including people like, just to make it personal, my depressed immune system depressed daughter, and my two aged parents, who are all three of them wonderful people who do not deserve to get COVID-19. So um, keep doing the right thing, and things will get better. I know they will. Again, thank you very much. And from the Beal Williams Rancho, we wish you all a very Merry November 15th, and I will see you very soon. Okay, good night. Peace.